Hey there, I'm Scott Telek, author of the Swithen series of novels, which is the only series of novels that tells the real legend of King Arthur as found in the old medieval texts. I read all those so you don't have to. Now, the rule of my series, The Swithen, is that I'm not allowed to change anything from the old legend. I can only add or enhance scenes or characters, so you'll know as you're reading that you're discovering the real legend of King Arthur, a lot of which is probably going to surprise you. One thing to notice as you watch is that this series is a little different, and this isn't one story with sequels where they kind of do the same thing but bigger. This is one continuous story, so each book is just the next installment of one massive saga. One other thing that makes this series different than almost all other fantasy series is that the story's completely laid out to the end right now, which will be 22 novels from now in my series, so there's not going to be any making it up as we go along as you see in other series like Game of Thrones or even Star Wars. Okay, so let's get started. Book 1, Our Man on Earth, begins in hell. The devil is mad that Christ came just 400 years before, and he wants a man of his own on earth that can lead people into temptation. So he picks this human woman, Melinda, and he kills off her family one by one until he gets to her. Then the devil impregnates her. Now at that time, having an illegitimate child meant an automatic death sentence by burning at the stake. Melinda is put into a tower until she has the baby, which comes out as this hideous green demon child. She has the baby baptized as soon as it's born, and this allows him to keep the powers he got from the devil, but use them for good. And that is Merlin. Did you know that was Merlin's origin story? But it's not over yet, because Melinda is still pretty much certain to be burned at the stake. Merlin is born with the knowledge of everything that ever has happened and everything that ever will happen, and he can also change in any form that he wants. Then in the book we take a deep dive into the formation of Merlin's incredible mind, and we show how his mother was so important to developing his sense of morality. One of my readers said his favorite part of the book was the conversations between Merlin and his mother about what is right and wrong and how he should best use the powers he's been given. So at just a year old, baby Merlin can talk, and when his mother's brought to trial, this talking genius baby defends her. And all of this is right there in the old legend. By the end of the book, Merlin has decided that the best way to use his powers is to transform Britain through the creation of a king that he can mold into the way he wants. That king, of course, is Arthur. Book 2, The Sons of Constance, picks up 7 years later. While Melinda was dealing with baby Merlin in that small town, this guy Vortigern has the king killed and takes over the throne. The king's brothers, Pendragon and Uther, fled the country as boys because they knew that they would be next. Pendragon and Uther are the Sons of Constance of the title, and keep your eye on Uther because he's going to go on to become the father of Arthur. Now this King Vortigern is a tyrant, and he wants to build a tower to keep himself safe for when the people finally revolt. Now the tower he's been building keeps falling down, and these psychics tell him that the only way it'll stand is if he puts the blood of a fatherless boy, which is of course Merlin, into the mortar. So they go and they bring Merlin from his mother. Merlin tells him that the tower falls because there's actually 2 sleeping dragons under there, a red one and a white one. And the red one is actually still the symbol of Wales to this day. So they dig up the dragons, and then there's a huge dragon fight. When the fight is over, Vortigern builds his tower, but Merlin comes to him and says, "Look, buddy, you know you stole this land wrongfully, and the Sons of Constance are on their way right now to overthrow you, and unfortunately you're going to die." So Pendragon and Uther do come back, and then they become the main characters of the story. The brothers soon side up with Merlin, and he gives them the advantage in the wars they're fighting. But soon after, King Pendragon is asking, wait a minute, who's in charge here, me or him? Because while he can't refuse the help that Merlin offers him, at the same time, how do they know they aren't just pawns in Merlin's plan? And perhaps he is. Meanwhile, this bad guy tries to outsmart and discredit Merlin, and he finds out the hard way that that's not really the best idea. Then, huge battle. Dragon of fire appearing in the sky. Merlin creates Stonehenge. That actually is in the old legend, and you have to love how the people of the Middle Ages said, well, we don't know how Stonehenge was made, so Merlin must have done it. Merlin creates the Round Table, because the Round Table was actually made for Arthur's father, Uther, and Uther actually has the first generation Knights of the Round Table. And throughout all of this, Merlin is placing the pieces that will result in the birth of Arthur. He's pretty single-minded. Which brings us to Book 3, The Void Place. Uther's now king, but he's suffering from the same issues his brother had. Like, is he really in charge, or is he just Merlin's puppet? Also, Merlin has told him that there's this great king coming in the future, which is, of course, Arthur. So Uther's like, well, what do I matter if this other king is going to be so much better than me? Only he doesn't know that this great king of the future is going to be his own son. So then Uther's all like, I'm going to make my own decision, but that turns out to be a huge failure. He finally has it out with Merlin and makes a total break from him. Both of these things send Uther into a major depression. And the only thing he thinks that can save him is the love of this woman Igraine. Problem is, she's already married to one of his closest allies, and getting her will send his kingdom into civil war. Nevertheless, he goes after her, and when she finally tells her husband what's going on, his kingdom is plunged into war. Igraine's daughters, who are just children in the book, include Margaux, who will go on to give birth to the man who will ultimately kill King Arthur, and Morgan, who's only 10 years old here but will grow up to be King Arthur's great enemy, the fierce sorceress Morgan Le Fay. Both daughters are going to be in the story almost all the way to the end. Also present is King Lot, who will go on to make war on Arthur 3 books from now. And also Uther's best friend Ulfius, fearsome knight who will go on to train and mentor young Arthur and fight alongside him in books 5 and 6. So finally Uther makes up with Merlin, who helps him have one night with Igraine. Merlin tells Uther that he will create a child on that night, and the price of all this is that he must give that child to Merlin, no questions asked. Now from here on out, things get ugly, especially for Igraine. Once the king realizes that this king of the future is going to be his own son, he knows that even by breaking up with Merlin, he was falling right into his trap. By the end of the book, Arthur is born, and Merlin takes him and places him into foster care with this family, the Ectors. This includes his brother, Kay, a character that will be with us right up until the last book of the series. At the end, the land is left without a king, and a sword shows up in a stone, unable to be drawn by anyone but the next true king of Britain. This leaves us ready for book 4, The Flower of Chivalry, which will tell of Arthur's childhood all the way up until he pulls the sword from the stone. And while you may feel like you know how that all works out, and I did just kind of tell you the ending, I found a way to tell it in a way that I can guarantee is not what you expect. From book 4 on, our main character is finally in the story, and the series will continue where Arthur fights fearsome battles, creates Camelot, marries Guinevere, receives the sword Excalibur, meets Lancelot, seeks the Holy Grail, and so much more. And you can read it, and not only will you enjoy it, but you'll discover the real legend of King Arthur that hasn't been changed and focus grouped in order to jibe with current tastes. And thus, I bid you adieu.